Hello, welcome to another tutorial. I'm Samuel Roberto Brimpong, and in this lesson, we are going to improve the layout quality using spacing, sizing, and position. This is where many websites either become clean, deliberate, or messy and accidental. Let's start with the spacing. When a design feels crowded, the issue is usually not the color. It's usually spacing. In Primal, the first spacing tools to understand are gap, padding, and margin. And I think we've gone through gap in a previous video, but we are going to go through, we've actually used all of them in a previous video, but we are going to use them again one after the other. Now, this is the design that we did in the previous video. I intentionally messed that up. Now, I want us to go through the process of making this a clean design like we had earlier. So now, anytime you select any element, any block element, including the images, you could see we have different modes. Now, I'm just going to hover my mouse over it for you to see these modes and what they do. So first, we have layout mode. We have spacing mode. That is what we are going to deal with. The layout is the normal mode you will be using when you are dragging things around in grid or flex mode. And that's what lets you change the width of elements. Now, when we switch to spacing mode, you can see we have two red icons or round circles around the bordered selected element. These are what we are going to use. Now, before I go on, there's another handle here I would like to let you understand. Now, before we continue, I want to go through an icon with you. This selection is on. As you can see, it's turn layout assist on or off. When this is on, it's good for you because when you create a grid like this, automatically the layout assist will make the grid responsive. You can tweak it however you want it later on, but it's going to make it responsive so that you don't have to do a lot of work when you get into the responsive phase, which we'll get to in a minute. Now, anytime you click on spacing mode, you get these four red round handles. Now, we have two. As we said, we are going to learn about the gap, the margins, and the paddings. So this is the padding. Padding affects within the object what you selected, like so. As you can see, it's affecting inside the object, right? And margins affect outside the object. You are getting what I mean? Now, there are two ways. In certain layouts, margins do not probably work. In others, they would work, and we'll distinguish between that later. But for now, as you can see, we have margin paddings here, and we are going to reduce the padding to be in line with these ones. There are times you would want specific values, and you will want to put in specific values for your paddings and margins. What you need to do is when you go into the inspector, you select the item and go down, you should see spacing, especially when you are in spacing mode. Remember, when you're in layout mode, spacing will not show. But when you are in spacing mode, it's going to show your spacing, where you can switch between margin and padding and put specific items there. So you can see we have 26 here, and we would want to make it 24 like the rest. Now, when you select any other item, it goes back into layout mode because you might not want to do padding again. Then if you want to do padding, margin, gap, you just select the spacing mode. Now I'm going to create another block. I'm going to create another section so that we can go over this in the normal flow. So I'm just going to add another section here. Right, and I'm going to remember my layout assist is on, so I'm going to click on a block. What I'm going to do is pull this down here, and then I'm going to reduce this. When I do that, you see I'm in layout mode, so I'm able to drag things around. Now I'm going to add another block so that we can do more of the padding and margin. Now this time I'm going to reduce that, and I'm going to switch to layout to spacing mode, which is going to allow me to do exactly what I want to do. So I'm going to select margin. I'm going to select margin, and I'm going to move this away. As you can see, it's affecting elements around it. So this is going to be used for spacing. So I can do that so that in case I put items in here, I can space them correctly. That's what the margin and paddings are for. If you remember, when we were dealing with this item here, we switched to spacing in order to deal with the margins between this text and this one, which, okay, this padding. So let me reduce this padding a bit, and then I go to margin, then we can deal with that. You can see it increases the margin. That's the space between the elements, and that's what you use to position elements in the software to make it easy. Now we talked about gap. What is gap? Gap is either for flex or grid layout, and this selection, as you can see in the grid layer, has a gap of 1. We can increase it 1 rem. We can increase it, as you can see. Now the gap between items has increased, or we can reduce it so that the gap reduces. We can even make it 0 so that they stick to each other, but we are still going to keep it at where it is now because it makes the layout clean. So put it simply, gap is the space between items in a layout. Padding is the inner breathing room inside a container or any item. And margin is the outer separation around the element. So here is a good way to picture it. Gap is between children. When I say children, this is the parent and this is the children. Then margin is inside the box. So let's see, margin is inside. As you can see, we have inside. So for example, if I'm to take a border for this to increase to 1, let's increase our border here to 1, and let's see what happens so that we can see clearly. So now we can see clearly the padding is in here and the margin is out there. So now let's talk about sizing. Width and maximum width are extremely important. When you select an item and you go into the size, you can see, depending on what item it is, it's either the width is going to be span or normal width. Let's select this, and I'm going to add a text that's going to make it easy to understand this concept. Now, width tells us, width will tell something how wide to be. Maximum width tells it how wide it is allowed to become. Right. So let's go here. When you select this item here, you go to size. The width is 100%, but it's allowed to be 45%, 4.5%. So for it to fill the full space here, I could just make it allowed width. I could make the allowed width 100%, and you can see that it fills the whole block. So in case, you can allow a text to be at most 50% of a block. That's what maximum width and width are for. So a lot of the time, you do not only want width, you would want a sensible maximum width too, right? So now if I set the maximum width to 100%, it's not changing the width, it's just telling us that this item can become at most 100% of its parent. Now let's look at position. If something is relative, it stays part of the layout. Absolute positioning is different. So for example, let's select this item And let's give it a background so that we can see it properly. Then in here we will select this and make it like this color and change the color to white color. Yes, now this is what we have. Now for text, I would like to go through one or two things for text. You see, text is this. When you select text, it goes into the text mode. So if you want to delete text or do anything in text, you have to switch it from this state to a different state, which is this one. Then you can see your delete icon, or you go into this mode and you can see that. So we've talked about this. So I'm just going to add a little bit of the padding around this. Yes, and this is what we have here. Now this text absolutely in the position, as you can see, position and layer here is relative. And we said relative is part of the layout. Absolute positioning gives you free placement. So in this case, I'm just going to make it absolute, and you can see it gives me free placement. So absolute positioning is useful for decorative objects, overlays, badges, floating visuals, and special effects. But if you use absolute positioning too early, the layout becomes harder to manage. So normally you do these things when you are totally done with whatever you're doing. So if you wanted to add a certain bubble here that talked about price, you add a new text, style it the way you want, and then drag it over there easily using absolute positioning. But you are making sure you're done with your layouts before you do those kind of things, so that it makes it easy to use. So the simple use rule here: use normal flow first. Use absolute only when it's actually needed for free placement. Position and layer are advanced tools. Use them when they help, not as a shortcut for fixing weak structure. So first, as we have learned so far, focus on having a wonderful structure and your website to look beautiful. It doesn't really matter how your design is. You can build any design with structure. In the next lesson, we will make the same layouts adapt properly across all screen sizes.